Welcome to the Putback on SNY.TV. I'm SNY's NBA insider, Ian Begley. We are on YouTube and all SNY social media platforms, and we're going to break things down on the Knicks today. Season-ending show, wrap things up, look ahead. We got two great guests to do so with. We've got Brendan Brown, 3 decades of NBA experience as a scout, coach, and an analyst. And we've got Shaun Geddes of the Knicks Wall. Always enjoy his Knicks thoughts. And so we're going to get right into it, guys. Let's start Game 7. Knicks obviously not showing up early on. Pacers hitting every shot in the gym. Brendan, when you were watching this, what did you see that should have happened, that didn't happen early on? What were your thoughts?
Well, you kind of look at the series as a whole, and starting with Game 1, there were times where Indiana had the pace game working, ran some of their different quick hitting sets, and they're just getting a ton of open shots. That was the tenor of the entire series, except maybe Game 3, second half. The Knicks defended them well. That's maybe a game the Knicks could have won that they didn't. Game 5, second quarter was excellent. But the potential for what happened in Game 7, it was there all along in the series because Indiana, by moving the ball quickly, got tons of open shots. And we saw in the first half yesterday, they just made them all.
Shaun, you've had some hours here to reflect and to take it all in. How are you feeling now, and what did you think about Sunday?
It was, wildly disappointing. I really agree with what Brendan said. I was saying after Game 6, I was really upset because it felt like we played like we had another game to play. And I feel like that really bit us. And I was saying, it was like, it would be one thing if we lost Game 6 because they shot lights out and, if a team is hitting everything, then you chalk that up sometimes. But I believe they were like 9 of 26 from 3. In Game 6, they just played harder than us. And so then you eventually get the game in Game 7 now where they come out and they're shooting lights out. And it's too late for that, which is why you can't put yourself in that situation. So overall, as far as the entire season, I'm really proud of this team, immensely proud of this team. I couldn't be prouder. I'm excited about next year. I'm appreciative of the fact that this team is so next man up mentality and so resilient that we could lose as many rotation pieces as we did, and I could still feel like we should have won. That's nice to build on. And Game 3 will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Brendan, when you look at this thing, you look at the injuries, right? Is this series, how different is this series if OG Anunoby, even is closer to where he was yesterday and can move around a little bit?
Well, you look at what's happened, and all the front court players for the Knicks have been out. And I think, Ian, we talked about this earlier in the playoffs. They're concerned about the offense of the Knicks and how can they get to 105, 110. And after the playoff stats, you look at what happened. The Knicks' offensive stats are actually pretty good for the 13 games. But where do they get hurt? And I'm sorry that I got to read this, but in the playoffs, out of 16 teams, defensive points per game, Knicks are 14th. Defensive field goal percentage, 16 out of 16. Defensive three-point percentage, 16 out of 16. Defensive assists, 14th. Defensive rebounding, something they're great at, only 11th out of 16. The paint points, 12 out of 16. And their overall defensive rating in the playoffs was 15 out of 16. So you think about Tibbs teams, you're thinking about grinding, you're thinking about stopping first options. Well, you were last in defensive field goal percentage and defensive three-point percentage. So maybe only having 6 or 7 guys, the ability to, keep up with a little bit of the 9 quick pace guys of Indiana, maybe they just got worn down. They lost 4 of the last 5 games, Indiana, and they got smoked in 3 of those games. So maybe just not enough energy at that defensive end.
And you talk about this season as a whole. Jalen Brunson says it was not a success. And to me, that's how you want your top player to view this thing. And I think that's the proper mindset for all those guys in that locker room, because you want more, obviously. Certainly the fans want more. But those words were parsed and I'm sure debated among Knicks fans. The one thing that I would say, though, is like when you talk about, Jalen Brunson's season, yes, he had an amazing season, but it's okay to say he did not play well in Game 7 early on, and he did not play well in Game 4 and Game 6, and early on, and there's room for nuance there. You talk about Tom Thibodeau. Brendan just mentioned Knicks maybe were gassed late in the season. It's okay to say, yeah, there are instances where Thibodeau probably played these guys too much, but it's unfair to paint him with a broad brush and say he generally overworks guys, because that's not the case. So I think there's room for nuance in all these kind of big time labels. But Shaun, I'm curious for you, what was your reaction to Brunson saying that this was not a success for him? How'd you take that?
I fully expect that from Jalen Brunson. And, that's why we love Jalen Brunson. That's who Jalen Brunson is. I'd expect nothing less. And, it's his job to say that, and it's my job to say that it wasn't a failure. Of course, we failed our objective. We didn't achieve what we wanted to be. We didn't get where we wanted to go. So, yes, of course, it's a disappointment. But this, I'm about to be 30 years old in August. This is my favorite season as a Knicks fan, and I don't even really think it's particularly close. The way this team fought to get to 50 games, to get to the 2 seed, to do that with all the adversity, the trades, losing Julius again when we found out he wasn't coming back, losing Mitch multiple times. Nobody ever made excuses. And I love the fact that, we don't lose like losers. So, it's nice to see him up there. And that energy goes to the entire fan base. Like, all the no excuses, next man up, all that stuff. I feel like that's where we all are. And I'm glad to see Jalen go up there and feel that same exact way. But I couldn't be prouder.
Brendan, for you, as a former coach, if your top guy says what Brunson said yesterday, how do you view that? And also, how do you view this season from your seat? Success, failure, something in between?
It's definitely a success, because you had to, kind of, as Shaun said, recreate the team 4 different times, depending on, the 17 and 15 team, and then the OG trade team, the January team. There are a lot of different versions of the team, and I think Tom Thibodeau and his staff maximized a lot out of individual players, and that's what you love to see. Now, losing in the second round, yeah, they did 1 game better than last year. That's the harsh reality of this morning. For all the panorama and everything that was going on, they played a 7 seed and a 6 seed in the playoffs, and they only went 7-6. They were 20-27 against plus 500 teams. So I think when you look forward here, and we talked about this earlier in the season, if another guy is going to come in, maybe not an A guy, but an A- guy, a really good player, how does he fit with Brunson? Brunson is so ball dominant at times, and it was needed at different points of the season for him to do so, for the Knicks to win. And then even in the first round, he's taken 29 shots a game against Philadelphia. Moving forward, however you want to look at this, do you want to go back to the January team? January team was good. That's Anunoby, Randall, Hartenstein, and then Jalen and Dante in the backcourt. They were incredible that month. Do you want to go to that and then fill in some gaps? Or do you want to truly change it on the top of your rotation? And if that's the case, does that guy flush with Jalen Brunson pretty well?
Yeah, it's fascinating when you talk about that offseason, and you mentioned Julius Randle, and I want to audible a little bit and just get into Randle before we hit on Tom Thibodeau. With Randle, people, I think you have to include in your analysis or your opinion on Randle that January stretch, because I think people kind of forget the role that he played in that stretch. He was a pivotal piece, and I thought that OG Anunoby on the floor, OG Anunoby was getting acclimated and he wasn't that aggressive on offense. But even with all those guys, I thought Randle fit in pretty well. To me, that's the perfect kind of paradigm for this team with Randle on it, is Randle, finding his spots, and maybe, I don't know if he was comfortable, wasn't comfortable, but I think he has to be comfortable moving forward with a clear hierarchy where Jalen Brunson is at the top, the ball's in his hands, and then Randle maybe gets fewer touches, fewer shots than he's been accustomed to, and kind of fills a role. And I think if he's comfortable with that, things will work out here with this team. But, can he be? I don't know. I'm not him. But I think that's one of the keys here when you talk about Randle. do you get January Randle, and how comfortable is he with Brunson kind of ascending in that hierarchy and having it be a more clear hierarchy? I'm just curious, Brendan, when you look at Randle and you've watched this team night in and night out, if they stay together generally and they don't go out and make a big swing, can this team, as it's constituted, compete for a title?
I think they'd be very close. If you had like everyone healthy and then you see what's going on in the rest of the East, are a lot of these other teams going to get better this offseason? Randle in January, I think he was like 12-2 out of the 14-2, I believe. He was shooting at a very high percentage two-point clip. He's taking less threes, which is a big part of it. He's shooting more twos, and then in clutch games with Brunson this year, Randle was actually shooting 55% in clutch games. So it seems to say that Brunson likes Randle, and Brunson can play with Randle. And then when you add Anunoby there as a great defender along the front line and very versatile in who he could guard, like I think that helped Randle. So some people are going to want to move Randle. I know Knicks fans don't like Randle. But if you're judging by what happened in January with that 5-man group, that was really, really solid.
Shaun, if I said to you, you could keep Julius Randle, move forward with the same group, or you could move Julius Randle, and let's just say, throw a name out there just for this example, you get Paul George, let's say, for an example's sake, or a player of that caliber where you're upgrading your roster from a scoring perspective, and now you have those two scenarios. Which would you pick based on what you have seen?
I would keep Julius Randle. I was at a point where I was ready to move on from Julius Randle just because I felt like he wasn't engaged. I felt like he didn't play with effort and really in moments where I needed to see him do so. But I think this season we got a completely bought in Julius Randle. As far as the hierarchy, there was a point where Jalen missed a couple games this season. And when he came back, Julius was like, it's good to have the head of the snake back. So he definitely accepted like what the hierarchy was, and it wasn't an issue for him. And during that January stretch you guys referred to, he and Jalen were both getting 30 every night, and I feel like that's something that would have really helped us. I love the way that he was being aggressive. Like Brendan said, he was shooting less threes. He was getting downhill, touching the paint, and spraying out, making the right kicks. And I think that he's going to create a lot of extra opportunities for guys going forward. And the continuity of this team can be a big deal. And, at the end of the day, Julius was, the start of this was going on right now. So, I would love to have him here. I would love to have him healthy. His health usually isn't an issue. So, I'm looking forward to a really good bounce back season for Julius Randle and being at full strength. I think if you look out there and you say what we need other than Brendan pointing out us being atrocious defensively, I think Julius Randle fills a lot of those needs. So just bring him back.
That's a good point about him being here for the whole thing, the start of this thing. And I think, can't speak for him, but I think he wants to be here. He wants to be a part of what this could be going forward. I think that's, one of the reasons, probably a minor reason, but maybe one of the reasons why at the end of the day they decided to shut it down and not try to get back with the injured shoulder and opted for surgery, because one of the factors was this thing could be, just getting started here with this team. There's a few-year window here where the Knicks could be good. So I agree with that sentiment. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. One early order of business for the Knicks in the offseason is Tom Thibodeau just completed the 4th year of his 5-year contract that he signed in 2020, has had the best run of a Knicks coach since Jeff Van Gundy. When you look at this 4-year stretch, 3 years in the postseason. And so I think it's a no-brainer that he gets extended. We've seen over the course of his time here, Leon Rose has had the green light to make a move and move on from Tom Thibodeau. He hasn't done it. I think there's a loyalty there, and that loyalty has paid off based on what we've seen on the floor. So there was also an element here this season where, people were looking at Thibodeau and how he interacted, got along with the front office, and because that was an issue for Thibodeau in Chicago, it's all kind of public knowledge. And what I was told was that they were pleased. They were happy with how Thibodeau got along with the front office this season. So everything seems to be pointing in the direction of an extension. Just going to come down to dollars and length and James Dolan and where he is on it in terms of committing the money. But Brendan, for you, you've watched Tom Thibodeau his whole coaching career, and you've watched him closely more recently. How has he evolved as a coach as you've watched him over the years?
Well, let's just give it 2 points. What was going on with the Knicks the season or two leading into Tom Thibodeau? You had some coaches who were trying their best, but really didn't have accountability on young players. So Tom Thibodeau comes in, and now there's a lot of accountability, and they were able to make the playoffs and even make the 4 seed that very first year with a great 16-4 run. Even the year he missed the playoffs the next year, the team is extremely competitive late into the season in terms of the way they close with a mix of young guys and veterans. And I think that helped for the next season. So he has done everything in terms of accountability, what was going on before he got here, what he's doing now. And I honestly think from charting most of the games this year, his offensive creativity, his offensive setup and game plan with different people as the main shooters on the team at different times. I thought his after timeout stuff, his end of game stuff, a lot of it was a lot better than what I usually maybe saw out of Tibbs in that regard in terms of design. And I think that's fantastic. This is 2024 NBA, and we're very much into offense and not defense. So I thought he made a good shift in that direction in that department this season.
Shaun, how do you assess Thibodeau this season, and what do you think about the idea of him being here for the next, 3-4 years?
I think that this is the best season in Tom Thibodeau's career. I think that he did an excellent job. No disrespect to Mark Daigneault, but I feel like he deserved Coach of the Year just based on the different iterations of the team, the way that he had to adjust to the trades, the injuries, all those things, and still end up with 50 wins. I think he was phenomenal. I think that he, what we're seeing with Deuce and the way he developed him, what he got out of Dante, what he was able to get out of Josh Hart, he just really maximized everything that we had this year. And I'm fully confident in him getting extended, being brought back. And I feel like it's a very nice place to be at because I wasn't always here. A couple seasons ago when we were starting Alec Burks and Evan Fournier in the backcourt, I was disgusted. We lost a lot of games that we should have won. We gave a lot of 20-point leads. But we're in a whole different place from that right now. Tom Thibodeau is excellent this year, and he's got my full support moving forward.
Yeah, the coach is always a lightning rod, especially pro sports here in New York. But I do think, the Knicks fan generally has embraced Thibodeau in the way that he was not embraced, first 2 years of his coaching tenure. So that extension, it should be done. We'll keep an eye on that one. Another thing, obviously, for the Knicks, OG Anunoby, free agency. He's got a player option that if he declines, he will become a free agent. Knicks can offer him most money, and I believe 4 years. So they're in the driver's seat there financially. One thing to keep an eye on, for me at least, is this offseason really starts with Philadelphia because they have money to spend. They're going to be aggressive. Can they get Paul George? If they can't, I think they would at least force the Knicks to pay OG Anunoby big money because they could make a big offer and force the Knicks to match it. So that's something I think about when I think about OG's free agency. But let's just talk about yesterday because, we reported it. He had been pushing to play in this game as late as Saturday. He had been telling people he really wanted to be out there with his teammates, basically regardless of the state of his hamstring. He didn't, nobody was going to tell him or convince him that he wasn't going to play. He wanted to be out there. He got out there, hit 2 threes, was not moving well at all. And Tom Thibodeau saw, liability on defense. I think we all saw that. But with OG and what he did yesterday, Shaun, what do you see there? You credit him for gutting it out? Or are you disappointed in, what happened on the floor? How do you view what he did leading up to Game 7 and on Sunday?
It's unfortunate that he got hurt. Injuries are injuries. They happen. It's very unfortunate. But I have great respect for him going out there. And, like, I don't have to guess that you didn't have it. I don't have to spend the summer wondering what would have happened if he could have gone. Like, he tried to go, it just simply wasn't there. And I can respect that. As far as, like, contract negotiations, I mean, I just feel like, I hope we save some money off the fact that he wasn't playing. His injuries have been a factor for him in the past. He missed a lot of time during the regular season with injury and then missed the playoff series with injury as well. So hopefully we're able to save some money there. But, he's got my full support as well. And I can't wait to have him back out there next season and hopefully have him be, relatively healthy.
Brendan, when you look at OG and what he brings on a defensive end, where he's going to get north of 30. We know that. I don't know if he'll crack 40, but he'll get north of 30. What he brings on a defensive end for this team, do you see that as money well spent, assuming health, assuming playing, 70 games a year?
Having been in some NBA groups and in the locker room every day and with the guys every day, I think you got to be a little bit careful about what you are paying him. And like you say, there could be competing teams to drive that number up. If you look at his defensive metrics when he played in the playoffs, he played 9 games. They weren't great. They were like around the middle of the road. So for all the talk of what he did in the regular season and team always wins when he plays, you got Randall and Brunson both making a little bit north of 25. What are you paying? What are you paying Anunoby? Because I don't think offensively he showed as a Knick that he's a major threat. I think this is a guy who has a little bit of trouble creating off the dribble. Is he a 3-and-D guy? Is he a guy who can post up a little bit? Yes. Is he a good cutter? Scores that way? Yes. But you're going to pay this guy $30, $35, $40 million for what? What are you paying him that kind of money for when down the road you're going to have to pay Brunson? If it works out, you would pay Randall if you felt like you wanted to do that. Brunson's going to get it. So what are you exactly giving Anunoby? I think you got to be careful here. You just say, hey, he's worth 30. Oh, if he's worth 30, Brunson's the best player on the team. He's making like 25. You got to be careful about that dynamic. And I think that you want OG back, but this, like many other things we could talk about for the offseason next year, we could go on for hours, me, you, and Shaun today, about things they can do. But I think this is a very precarious situation. What do you really give him?
I want OG to stay, but that price is interesting to me. Like you said, the struggles offensively as far as creating off the dribble. I think that OG is an amazing player on both ends of the floor. I think that his strength allows him to create, even though his dribble doesn't necessarily do so. He can drop his shoulder and kind of gets that little mid-range jumper from anywhere. I expect him to sharpen those skills in this offseason and continue to grow there. But my main concern with him is just injuries. Availability is the best ability. If you're a great defender and you're this guy and you're so important to the team, and we're going to pay you as far as the value of being important to the team, you've got to be dependable. I've got to be able to depend on you being there. I know the injuries aren't necessarily his fault. It is what it is. But it's a long-running history of injuries, and he missed a lot of games. And that was a concern of mine when we traded for him. We traded, 2 guys who I loved, and we traded for a guy who had a really bad injury history, and we played so well that, and he's a Knick now, so I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to hold on to it. But ultimately, it came back to bite us just in terms of his injury history. So I hope that he's able to clean that up. And, at this point, I just have trust issues with injuries all around. So it's not really his fault. This is just me being a scorned and traumatized Knicks fan this season.
And I really think within Anunoby that, we all cover him and the team. And you always say, well, it's great. He's like a 3-and-D guy. He's a tremendous defender. But isn't it great that he only requires like 10, 11 shots? Well, who asked Anunoby that? Like, maybe he thinks, and you hear this on the inside when he was in Toronto and then when he was traded to New York, hey, maybe he wants to shoot the ball 15 times a game. And now how does that fit within, if you get the whole group back and you have everyone available, is that a real thing? And it can be a real thing. They only had a short time period together. Brunson, DiVincenzo, Anunoby, Randall, Hartenstein. They were killing it. They were killing it at both ends of the floor. So, maybe when you get to the beginning of the next year and how you attack, how you play guys, who gets shots, etc., maybe some things, like change around or they just flow a little bit better. Because from everything you hear, he wants to be more of an offensive impact player.
My fault, fellas. Dropped out for a second. Audio issue. I do have a fan question on OG Anunoby. Eddie from YouTube, he says, if OG gives you 60 or fewer starts, misses half the playoffs with an injury, was giving up Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, still worth it? That's a tough one. Shaun, how do you see that?
Man, RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley were like my favorite players. And so that trade hurt a lot. And ultimately, I would say that it's worth it. I mean, hindsight is 2020. So when we're here and he wasn't playing in the playoffs, it's easy to say we could have had those guys. But I think that the team that it made us, the way that it strengthened us, the way that we looked in January, the way that he was able to switch on to Embiid in the Sixers series, that's not lost on me. And I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. And of course, going forward, that trade wasn't just about this season. They I guess clearly didn't really want to pay Quick to do what he does, and when you get the production they're getting from Deuce for $4 million a year, and then you got Dante for $12 million a year, and yeah, I guess you don't really want to jump to throw 35 at Quick, so Quick got his opportunity over in Toronto. RJ's home. It worked out for everybody, but I think that moving forward, if OG can be healthy, it's too early to say what the returns on this trade are, but. It's easy to say now that we should have kept them. But hey.
Right. And I think one thing with the salary number on OG, like the cap's going to go up, right? So the percentage of the cap, I think, is how you look at this thing. And if he's, 35, the percentage is going to be a certain number right now, but it's going to be a smaller percentage as you go forward and the cap increases, especially after the next TV deal for the league. So we'll see. But Isaiah Hartenstein obviously is another free agent for New York, another question for them, something they have to deal with. Hartenstein, to me, well, I know this. One of the reasons the Knicks didn't want to go all the way up on Emmanuel Quickley, I don't know if it was a major reason, minor reason, but they wanted to have the financial wherewithal to re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein. So that tells you that they want to bring him back badly. Now they're limited in what they can offer Hartenstein because of the collective bargaining agreement. They have early bird rights on him. I think they can go plus 16 plus annually to start, and then the contract will have standard. It could have standard increases, and so they give him multiple years, 16, 17 a year. Obviously, teams that have cap space can go north of that. We know Orlando was right in there on Hartenstein this summer that the Knicks signed him. We know Orlando has cap space now. I don't know specifically where they're looking, if they want to invest big money in a big man, but Hartenstein will be one of the top big men on the market. Detroit had interest in Nick Claxton big time last summer, so that tells you kind of where they may be on a big man. Nick Claxton, another free agent big man this summer. Expect him to go back to the Nets. I would expect Hartenstein to ultimately go back with the Knicks too, but there are going to be decisions to make there. Now, when you look at the impact that he has had on this group this season, Shaun, I'm just curious, do you value him as a guy where you say, let's do everything we can to bring him back? The Knicks have Mitchell Robinson, Jericho Sims, Precious Achiuwa, more of a 4, not necessarily a 5, but they do have other bigs on the roster. Do you see him as a guy that you can't let go?
Yes, I do. Just one, for chemistry, his consistency, and I think it's important, if we've learned this year especially, it's important to have depth at the center position. It's important to have depth everywhere. And so, having Mitch and Ihart puts us in position to have 48 minutes of very good center play. I don't want to knock, but I don't want to depend on Jericho Sims as a reliable option. His minutes were pretty terrible this year. The regression was sad. So I definitely say you pay Isaiah Hartenstein. I think he's a big part of what we do with this team on both ends of the floor. I think the way he stepped up and made himself, so irreplaceable pretty much that he stayed in the starting role. He opened up the offense with his passing. His offensive rebounding was excellent. And his defense outside of the playoffs was very solid as well. So I definitely want to keep Isaiah Hartenstein. And on the Roommates show, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart's podcast, which every Knicks fan should be watching, by the way. You're not a Knicks fan if you're not watching it. But, they had Isaiah Hartenstein on there. And, they were just talking about getting it done and him coming back and how he wanted to be here. So keep that going.
Brendan, is this something that you would want to keep going? Excuse me. No matter the cost. Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein obviously gives the Knicks great depth at center. Do you see this as a must-have for New York, or could they use some resources elsewhere? How do you view it?
Well, from being the Knicks announcer, this is like one of my least favorite things, because what everyone does is says, oh, I like Hartenstein better than Mitch, or I like Mitch better than Hartenstein. No. You need both of them because they offer so many different things as the two players. They're best friends on the team. They support each other very much. So to me, they're both guys who can play very effectively around the half of a game minutes thing. Now, Hartenstein, the best thing he does offensively is pass the basketball. But conversely, when he does do that, and he did it for a couple of games in the series, if he's up at the elbow or he's at the top of the key in all the split game options, then he's not on the offensive glass because he can't be. He's 18 to 20 feet away from the basket. But I still think that's the best way to use him. If you have him in the starting group, and, those four other guys, he can be a great piece in that regard. He is a phenomenal, I sense where the ball should go passer. The Clippers used them that way. I don't think Tom's used them enough that way. And I just think that could be a great dynamic for the rest of the team. He and Mitchell Robinson and even Sims are great screeners. And for all the dribble handoffs that you run and all the elbow and side pick and rolls that you run, having really good screeners in Hartenstein, in Mitch, in Sims, that's a big part of Jalen Brunson's offense. So you want this guy back. He checks many boxes, but can we please stop with, well, I'm playing him over him. No, you need them both. That's how you have a really good team. That's how you get deep in the playoffs, when you have 9, 10, 11, 12 guys you can really count on.
That's strong, very strong. I think I agree with you, Brendan. I'm not saying this in jest, but maybe Isaiah Hartenstein's agents should clip that off and hang on to it for the upcoming summer and when they talk to teams. Let's go big picture, guys, before we wrap this thing up. This is the summer to do something big if you want to go there, if you're the Knicks, because you've got the Jalen Brunson next contract that will be kicking in. You won't have him on the most team-friendly deal in the NBA, arguably. And then, obviously, Julius Randle, you got a decision to make there on a potential extension for him. So, this is a summer to do something. Obviously, the second apron penalties are going to be there when everything kicks in on the new CBA next season. So everything is kind of aligns for the Knicks to do something this summer. We've been waiting for that big trade for so long. I'm kind of tired of talking about it, but everybody reports it. We reported it. Nothing has changed. They're still going to be aggressive if an opportunity presents itself on a trade market. Shaun, put your Leon Rose sport jacket on for a second. What are you doing? Are you going after Splashy Move? Who is it? Or are you running it back? What do you think?
I think primarily I'm running it back. I think my primary focus is keeping this team together, going with that continuity and just seeing what we can do. That January team. I think we're going to say the word January all summer, unfortunately, but that January team was really special. And so if you want to make a slight tweak or addition to that, but I don't want to break that up. And I don't think we saw what this team is capable of. So I'm not really on the side of, making a move, especially if it's my move would have been, if you asked me 3 to 4 months ago, upgrading the 2 spot. But I feel like Dante DiVincenzo was so excellent all season with his shooting, with his defense, with the way that he stepped up for us. He averaged 30 points a game in his Pacers series. So I don't really feel the need to go get a 2 guard. So I definitely would be running it back. If I were to make a move, like if we were on my 2K team, I traded for Mikal Bridges because I like the idea of having 2 big wings next to Jalen, 2 big 3-and-D wings. I think that's kind of nice, and then that also gives you more insurance for the unfortunate, inevitable games that OG is probably going to miss, and allows you to keep Dante. So I'd make that move. I don't know if the Nets would be open to it at all, but that's my main move.
Brendan, how about you? Put your Gerson Rosas sport jacket on. Let me know what you think.
Well, one thing first, DiVincenzo was fantastic in the playoffs, fantastic in the Pacers series, not getting written about enough, not talked about enough. Averaged over 22 points a game, 46% from three in the Pacers series. And he and Burks were like single-handedly, the two of them, keeping the Knicks in the game yesterday up to the third quarter. So Dante, for a guy who really struggled the first 10, 15 games to get acclimated to the team, at some point it all snapped together and it was great. And yeah, he's making $12 million, so it's even better. If I'm the Knicks, I'm going to be pretty aggressive in talking to teams about a big guy. Because I don't think you can say the East, which was in tatters after the All-Star break, is going to look like that again. Like Milwaukee could be better. Cleveland could be better. Philadelphia could be better. Miami could get lowered from Milwaukee. Like, that's what happened to Denver in the West. Like, a lot of teams got better in the West, and Denver got a little bit worse because of their bench, and they got caught. So I'm not saying don't run it back. You can run it back. But if Randall is worth 30 in a trade, and Bogdanovich is a sliding scale because of his contract, could be 19, then you have someone like a Deuce who's like $5 million, is that's why they signed him in that contract, maybe as a chip, and he played pretty well. So, like, you could go after the A guy. If the A guy makes sense, and you think the A guy, when you start thinking about Boston, Milwaukee, and everybody else, you need to go to that level of talent to be really good in the playoffs. Let's remember who the Knicks just played here, in, 7th seed and a 6th seed in a very bad Eastern Conference. I'm not diminishing what they did. They had a great season. But as you're looking big picture, if other teams get better, do we need to get better? And then if you use Randall and Bogdanovich, you're already to $50 million by way of a trade if you were kind of thinking that way.
Yeah, a couple quick notes just based on what you guys said. Donovan Mitchell, I don't think that, it's a fait accompli that he asks out of Cleveland. I think one of the things there is Cleveland could be aggressive on the trade market, trying to add a piece with Donovan, and then he stays and signs his extension, and we'll see where Cleveland goes. As far as the Knicks and Donovan Mitchell, I don't get the sense that they would be as aggressive now as they were a couple summers ago on Donovan. Get the sense that some people internally just feel like the way this team is going now, Mitchell, they would not need to be as aggressive on him because maybe there are others who fit the group better than Donovan Mitchell. We'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, New Orleans could be moving some parts around, or Brandon Ingram. There's been a lot of rumors around him, where he goes. So that is a place to look. And then for the Knicks, too, I think if there's ever a world where OG Anunoby doesn't re-sign, I don't think there is. I think he's back here. But then, they've had interest in Paul George in the past. I would think that they kick the tires on Paul George. And for Paul George, who's going to give him that 4th year on his contract? The Clippers, to date, have not been willing to do so. Would Philadelphia go 4 years? I would assume they would. Would the Knicks go 4 years if, again, the scenario were to come up? I don't know. But that, to me, is where this offseason starts. It starts with Philadelphia. It starts with Paul George. And then the dominoes fall from there. We'll see how it all plays out. For us, be sure to check us out in podcast form as well on the Putback. We are available wherever you download your podcasts. And that's a wrap for this season. But we will be back soon with more off-season content on the Putback, on Honda Sports Night, on our mailbag. So keep an eye out for all of that. We appreciate you guys sticking with us all season, and we will see you soon.